Since I know what day this thing is going live, no, nothing about this is a joke. Well, I suppose the one thing that's slightly a joke about it was I was supposed to get this video out before the end of March, and I didn't. And which is why it's coming out on April 1st, and also why it's coming out later than I normally put out videos on this channel. So, joke's on me, I suppose. But other than that, we're taking this seriously. It's not a game. Or is it a game? Well, it is to the characters involved because we're talking about Sleuth, continuing our look at 70s and I think some 80s as well as I get further into the year. A slate of commissioned movies that I got paid to take a look at through my Patreon. Let's do the Patreon plug at the front end. So this one is hard to talk about spoiler free. I'm going to talk spoiler free for as long as I can, but eventually I'm going to have to start to talk spoilers. Otherwise, there's huge swaths of this that I just can't cover. So here's the thing I'll say. And I don't necessarily mean this as a negative, but it is just kind of a statement of fact. You can tell this was originally a stage play. It's two people. It's incredibly limited settings. There's a very clear point where like an act break would go. So this, yeah, you can tell this was adapted from a play. That having been said, I think for the most part it still works. And it still works for a couple of reasons. They did as much as you could do with the setting to expand it beyond what you could have gotten away with on stage in terms of, having the characters move into other spaces. It opens outside in a way that wouldn't have worked on stage. So, things like that. But then there's also the fact that what is compelling about this is watching these two men wind each other up, I guess is how I'll go with for right now. This stars Sir Laurence Olivier and Michael Caine. And the premise of this is that Laurence Olivier is playing a very well-renowned, very well-respected, very wealthy, very upper-class mystery novelist. And he invites this guy over. He invites Michael Caine over. And Michael Caine he's not like lower class, but he's, his father was an immigrant to this country. He owns a couple of hair salons. Like, he's doing fine. He's fine. But compared to, this author, he's way beneath him. But the author invites him over because the author knows that he is having an affair with his wife. And things kind of build from there as the two men spar and play and work towards figuring out how much the other knows about what each of them is up to, try and at various points kind of get in good graces, maybe do something together. Maybe it's just a mind game. Maybe it's something more serious than that. It's a lot as it goes. But it does a very good job of having what is ultimately a series of conversations between two people with only one time jump happening, and otherwise pretty much unbroken series of conversations, having it flow and build and actually tell a story, not just about what's happening now, but filling in the background of these men as you go. It's actually a really good exercise in terms of delivering a lot of factual information about people without having it sound like just straight up expositional dialogue. There's plenty of lines in here that are mainly there to fill you in on what this one's deal is, what that one's deal is, what the deal with the wife is, even though she is not physically present at any point. One could, I suppose, make a certain misogynistic argument against the movie. I would argue that, like, the characters that are portrayed are a bit misogynistic. I'm not sure the movie is. And honestly, I think ultimately, if it is going to be a story about the men, I think a lot of times you're probably better off just having the women not be present. Like, go ahead and have the men, refer to them in the, dismissive and underdeveloped way that they view these women, rather than having an actual underdeveloped woman character there to confirm it. and it's a mild tangent. But the way in which details about themselves, some of which they reveal about themselves, some of which each one tells the other about himself to show how much they already know about each other. And it does phenomenal job just bringing forward all the information that you're going to need to follow what's going on and understand what we're getting. And boy, I'm trying to think what else is there for me to say before I get into spoilers. It does a good job at both building and then relieving tension, which is a tricky thing to do without an actual proper scene change. Like they move from one room to the other, but like it's, as I said, other than this one time jump point, the whole thing's pretty continuous. And so being able to build tension, relieve that tension, build it back up again around something slightly different so that there is an ebb and a flow to the conversation, that's a hard thing to do. And that's something that in general you get a lot more in stage plays than you do in film, because in film there's a lot more visual, camera, lighting, set, etc. tricks that you can use to create those builds of tension and release of tension. Whereas on stage, yeah, you've got lighting, yeah, you've got a little ambient noise if you want to do it, but for the most part, all you've got are the people on stage and they have to do it. So it is interesting to see that captured as well on film as this is. Cripes. I don't know how much more I can talk without spoilers. I think it's a good movie. I guess the one thing, so there's an aspect to the second half that I think might lose some people if they assume it's actually meant to be a twist. And like, maybe it was. I don't regard it as one because here's why, without saying what the heck it is. There's an aspect and an element of the second half where many audiences are going to spot it pretty much immediately. And I can see it dampening their experience of taking this in, thinking that they're ahead of the movie. But the way that I took it in, granted, maybe part of this is because I've seen it once before, but I was also pretty sure I clocked this very early on the first time I saw it as well. But I think the reason it still works is that it's not really meant to be a surprise because it's still ultimately about men messing with each other. That's what the entire thing is about. And getting ahead of this one specific reveal doesn't remove the elements of what is actually at play. So I think it still works. And I think that's the best that I can talk around it in vague terms. We got to talk spoilers. So if you haven't seen it, and you want to, good luck. It's not officially streaming anywhere. Maybe it's been fully uploaded to some sites with tube at the back end of the name. I don't know. I don't know anything about that. I'm just saying. Maybe it's out there. But from here on, there'll be spoilers. So first half is initially what seems like this sort of confrontation between this poor guy and this wealthy guy. Miles is Michael Caine's character, and Arthur is Laurence Olivier's character. So Arthur views Miles with such contempt. Like, you can tell what a stuck-up, xenophobic, misogynist, possessive, spoiled jackass Arthur is. And he doesn't think he's any of those things. Or if he does, he thinks it's okay. But that doesn't make Miles the good guy in the situation either. Because initially you have Arthur saying to Miles, okay, look, I know you're having an affair with my wife. It's fine. I'd actually really like you to take her off my hands. The problem is I know you can't afford to. She has expensive taste and you don't make enough money. So here, I'm going to bring you in on the scheme to rob some valuable stuff from my house. You go off with that and give her a decent life. I'll collect the insurance on it. And then I can be with my actual mistress, who I'd rather be with than my wife anyway. And that's our initial sort of first thing, like, oh, okay, that's unusual. And then as it moves along, realizing or having it revealed that Arthur, does intend to kill this man. And this entire thing has been a game. It's been him messing with him. And I mentioned there was a clear act break. And it is the point at which he appears to shoot Miles. And we then get a time jump, and a police officer shows up to talk to Arthur. Now, the thing that I said, I think most audiences, especially modern audiences, I'm not even sure it's a modern audience thing. I think it's a film audience thing. I think most film audiences are gonna clock pretty fast, which is that the police officer who shows up is Miles in disguise messing with Arthur. And again, I think that still works because what this movie is about more than anything are these two guys who just cannot stop escalating, messing with the other one. And it just keeps getting worse. And this is just the latest escalation. I also suspect it probably works a little bit better on stage where, one, there isn't a camera like right there where you get a real good look at his face. Not to knock the makeup job that they did. They did a solid job, and Michael Caine puts on a convincing enough, slightly off from his own accent, or at least the one he'd been using up to that point in the movie. But like between the distance of a stage, the harsher lighting of a stage, and also like, if you're doing it as a stage play, even if the audience clocks it, it is a little bit of a stage play convention for actors who are playing a character who is only in Act 1 come back to play a different character who's only in Act 2. Heck, Hamilton does that. So it is kind of a convention of theater where even if you clock that it's the same actor, you might not immediately clock that it's meant to be the same character in disguise. Whereas film, yeah, if you clock that that's Michael Caine, that's your immediate and automatic assumption. But again, I think it still works even if you clock that. And I think that's the one aspect that I think suffers a little bit from the translation of stage to film in terms of having that be a little bit harder to clock on stage and probably not completely giving the game away, even if it is clocked on stage. But setting that aside, ultimately this is just Miles messing with him to a new level. And then it escalates further past that as he claims, and this turns out to not be true, but also as an audience, you're like, wait, did he? He claims to have killed Arthur's mistress and set him up to be found out for the murder. And now he's just messing with Arthur. And again, it's this escalation of these two men who are treating, well, Arthur especially is treating all this as a game. To him, this is a game with no consequences because he thought that all he did was spook Miles with a blank after convincing him that he was going to kill him. And now he's being told by what he thinks is a police officer, no, he's actually dead, and I'm finding evidence all over your damn house. So there's this whole just, it keeps building, and it keeps getting worse. And again, for Arthur, it is a game most of the way through. Although you can see the moments where he breaks, where he knows he's not in control, and he realizes this is not a game. And you can see what happens to him. And Olivier's great for that. And for Miles, it is not really a game. He's playing a game, but for him, this is more serious because he's so fed up with stuck-up jackasses like Arthur humiliating him across his entire life. This is a lifetime worth of revenge he's going to take out on one guy. And again, just each one messing with the other and having this deep ingrained disgust for what the other fundamentally is. Ultimately, it's a show about men who think they're clever and class disparity through the lens of this sort of pseudo murder mystery. It's a lot of fun. I do enjoy it. Personally, I prefer, for something like this, I slightly prefer the movie Death Trap. Came out a little bit later, which bears a lot of similarities to this, actually. I honestly kind of wonder if when Death Trap, which is also based on a play, was written, if it was written on the basis of, okay, so I went and saw Sleuth at the theater. There's a certain tension between those two characters that this play doesn't do much with. I want to do something with that. That's what it feels like Death Trap is. Both are good, by the way. And I would recommend seeing both of them, although probably not back to back. They're probably a little too similar. But they are also different enough to feel very distinct in terms of the nature of the characters and the ins and outs of why this is happening and the logistics and the dynamics at play. But I do enjoy this kind of thing. If you've ever wondered what kind of story or house inspired stuff like the mansion in Knives Out, which just feels like it's littered, like the entire house is decorated in Chekhov's guns. Well, movies like this are where it gets that inspiration. So yeah, I enjoyed this. This was a fun revisit for me because this is one of the few on the docket for this that I had already seen. But Sleuth, what did you think about it? Have you seen it? I mean, if you have, or if you have any other movies that sound like what I've just talked about, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Already plugged Patreon. Don't worry too much about that. Like, share, subscribe. Those help me out. Don't worry too much about that either. I mean, we take a relaxed attitude around here. You can just come on back next time you need a break. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Goddess Elida, Zubin Lafula, Jen, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Oliver B., Melissa Pedersen, Movie Turtle, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Auntie Kate 808, Andre, Becky Sparks, Claire Wright, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Kasparov, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Toku Blahuvian, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, Pal Barabajagal, Mary Mello, Mira G, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. If you want to help me ensure that I can keep these guys fed, as well as the other animals and strange creatures that sometimes occupy my house, check out the rewards on the Patreon. Yeah, hello to you too. Bless you.